Welcome to the making of a digging fork handle with me, Scotty Bones, at scottybones.com. Our D-handled fork broke on us. We needed a new handle. So I went up to the forest and I picked a Douglas fir tree and cut it down. It looks pretty tiny, but it's about 30 years old. I clamped it to the porch. I got out my draw knife and I started slicing some skin off it. A couple spots where the branches were sticking out, I needed to get a chisel out and with my hammer knock off the little nubs. Those little nubs make it hard for the draw knife to pull toward you and get the bark off the tree, which normally comes off easily in strips, like you can see right now. If I had a proper clamp, I would have put it in the clamp and knocked all the nubs off the entire length of the tree before I clamped it to the porch. But this was an impromptu project and my workbench was piled high with a bunch of junk, so I just strapped it to the porch there with that clamp you see. And since it was only a small project, I decided it was okay and I could deal with the hassle of what you can see, a little bit unstable situation. If I was going into production, I would have cleaned off my workbench and clamped this pole in the clamp for a much easier time of it. With a piece of the old handle, I'm checking the diameter of the new pole so that I make sure it tapers down to the proper dimensions so that it can slip into the shaft of the fork. Here I am showing you the diameter once again, checking to make sure that my handle is achieving the proper dimensions. There's a slight taper to it, so I wanted to make sure I got that right. Now we jump ahead to the handle. I got it inside the shaft and it looks good, but the pole is a little bit too long. Could be the longest fork in the world. Now I'm going to decide how long to make the fork after I push the pole down into the shaft. With my folding pruning saw, I cut off the excess length. And there we go. I'll double check again to make sure the length is proper, and it looks like it's pretty good. Can't tell you how long I've wanted a long handle on my D-handled fork because I got tired of bending over when I'm digging. It makes my back sore. Now comes the task of stripping the rest of the bark off the pole. And as you can see, that one clamp is a little bit janky. It moves around, but like I said, it's a short project and my workbench was piled high with other projects and junk, so I just went with it and it seems to work out okay with a little bit of ingenuity and patience. There were some other little nubs from branches on that tree that I could have dealt with earlier, like you saw with the chisel and the hammer. If that were the case, then that draw knife would have sliced right through the bark like butter. But that's why you see that draw knife getting hung up. Also, you want to make sure that your draw knife is plenty sharp before you do this. It's got a beveled edge on it, so it's pretty easy to keep sharp with a rat tail file. And also, I guess I couldn't recommend pulling that draw knife towards yourself. Not a recommended practice. But then again, I was just doing it for myself. And I wasn't pulling too hard. But that's no excuse. Now is it? The handle's done, more or less. It's rough form. There I am describing that it came from the forest, what is called an overstood forest, which means there's too many trees in the forest, and the little trees, which they call pecker poles, grow in the understory with very tight growth rings. You can see there the broken handle. In order to get the broken stub out, I had to get a Sawzall and cut the pin that held the previous handle in. I did that with a metal blade on the Sawzall. Next, I will drill a hole through the new handle and slide a bolt through there and get a nut and screw it on. And then I say I'll file it off with a wood file, knock the edges down, and then sand it to make it smooth. And with that wood file, I'll bevel off the edges, and it'll be good to go. Brand new handle. So I found the proper diameter drill bit, get it lined up, and with any luck, I'll hit the hole on the other side. And I did it. There's the bolt. I found one that was a proper diameter. Tap it through with my hammer. The bolt is a little bit rusty. And the bolt's rusty, the nut's not. I slide the nut on and spin it on. And use a pair of wire pliers rather than a wrench, because I didn't feel like getting a wrench and the pliers were right there. With the reciprocating saw, with a metal cutting blade, I cut off the excess. And then I file it off to make sure there's no little burrs that could cut me. Looks pretty good. with my wood file. The handle has dried off a little bit. It's got a pretty good tooth on it. So now I'm going to file off some of the rust spots. If there's any high spots, knock those down so it feels good in the hand. And I just spin it around, keep working it with the file. If there's any ridges, file those down. Any spots that feel uncomfortable to the hand. I put a little bevel on the edge there. Smooth out the rough part on the very top of it. Again, if you did this in a clamp or a vise on your workbench, it would be a little bit easier. But I'm working freestyle al fresco. I'm using 100 grit sandpaper there, and that's all I have. 80 grit sandpaper would be better to start with this project, and then move up to 100. Then if you wanted to go up to a slightly finer grit, would be perfect. Boom, done.